Welcome to Conversations from the Barn at Everwood Farmstead. These are casual chats with visiting artists. Creaky barn, bugs, and all. Enjoy.
This is Conversations from the Barn. This is Chris Everett and Bill Underwood, and we are really excited today to talk to our artist on retreat, Miss Kate Vinson. And you are an organic sculptor. We're fascinated with your work and thrilled that you are here with us. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well. Organic sculptor. I never heard that term put together, so I really like that.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
How would you describe yourself?
I always say fiber sculptor. Yeah, I always say fiber sculptor.
We've been describing you as an organic sculptor for like months now.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love it.
I don't know where that came from.
I love it.
I don't know if that was from your application.
We just made it up,
Sure.
evidently.
We just made it up, exactly.
I love it. Well, I mean, all my work goes very organically. Even if I use inorganic materials, it's still very organic. So that right there that's a lovely takeaway, actually. That it's even more broad. You know, I'm a kinesthetic learner, so things that I can touch and feel and manipulate are really important to me, and it's again how I process. So, yeah. So anything that I can touch, I consider fibers. Yeah. I'm really excited.
When did this start?
Yeah.
As a child or 2 years ago? Or, I mean,
Right.
As
a 5-year-old, were you crawling through the woods?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I don't remember. Maybe. Well, let's see. Gosh, in 2000, I moved to Mankato, Minnesota. I had lived in Alaska, and I had left Alaska for the last time, deciding that I needed to be back kind of in the continental U.S., so to speak.
Okay.
So I decided to go to graduate school. I had been working in adventure education for about 5 years. And there's a program called experiential education in Mankato, Minnesota. And while I was there, I still had this kind of thought around art education, but it hadn't really formed. When I was a high school student, I studied photography, or played with it, really. And then it all sort of came back together when I was in Minnesota. And then I was like, well, I think I'll get my teaching license in art education. One of the classes was fiber arts. Another class I really enjoyed was ceramics. But at that time, I wanted to be really intense with my program. I didn't want to take, 4 or 5 years. I wanted to just, get it done. So I ended up taking a lot of fiber art classes because the schedules were more conducive. And I didn't need a lot of equipment as well. So I could always just do something in front of the TV, something on the couch, anywhere, everywhere. And I could use anything and everything. Yeah. Organics. I'm still fascinated by that topic.
From here on out, actually,
Yes.
you're not allowed to use anything inorganic in your career.
Okay.
Because we've just redefined you, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Change your
Thank
CV
you.
this evening.
Okay.
And now we're done.
All right. Yeah. Awesome. I love it. I will keep that in mind.
Well, certainly this week it feels like you've been in the organics toolkit.
Yes.
What did you find here at Everwood?
What I found was perhaps why I go to nature. And I think a lot about that because I wanted to start to figure out community-based art. And there's a lot of that in the metro region. There's a lot of it around various justice issues, and I think those are fantastic. I tend to not work that way, so I wasn't really sure if that was kind of an opening for me to figure out. But I do work with nature, and I think what I really started to figure out was, for me, particularly this last year and a half, nature is solace for me. It's a reconnection. It's letting go. It's just moving on, moving forward, being in the present. So all of those pieces are helping me discover what my connection is with nature. And I think that's really what this place has been as well. I arrive, I'm super giddy, I'm super excited, like, oh my God.
You were super giddy when you got here.
I was like, I can't believe this is me. It's often that unknown. I think I was actually given a note to Everwood like twice. The first time somehow it just didn't take, and the second time was right after a winter break from school. So I had a little bit of time to be like, okay, I'm going to look at these places, and then I think as an artist you get used to, or you try to, like, okay, I applied for that, now I just let it go. I applied for that and I let it go, and I get back to work. And thankfully the pandemic really helped with that. There wasn't anything else to focus on. Yeah. So when it came through, I was like, wait a minute, I get to go here. This is really exciting. I actually don't know much about this place, but it looks great. There's a great barn. There looks to be some music. And quiet, for me, quiet as well. I often go to places and I don't have a lot of distractions on. I don't have a TV, I don't have radio. I just like the silence of it. So that was another big takeaway. And then just figuring out, like, what does nature mean to me, and can I activate it from a community standpoint? I often in the city, I'll walk by and you'll see trees taken down everywhere, for whatever reason. And sometimes they're really large trees, sometimes they're little ones, but there's just these little stumps everywhere, and I'm curious about that. And I think that's a really poignant moment in an urban area. We have parks, we have rivers, but what about these trees that are very often in the neighborhoods, or just just next to your house? So what is that, and how can I start to bridge that a little bit more with people? As an educator, when you take students out in the wilderness, especially if they're not familiar with the woods or the natural environment, they tend to react in a really extreme way. They tend to not see the tree or the bees in kind of a community aspect. So what does that look like? What's that question look like as I was here trying to figure that out? How can we bridge that gap so that the environment is not necessarily utilitarian, but how are we more connected than that?
If I remember right, that was the focus of your application.
I believe so, yeah.
Environmental education with respect to trees. Yeah. Have you advanced that while you've been here, or have you gone in a different direction? I know you mentioned you've gone in a couple of different directions since you've been here. Yeah. What's happened with that?
Well, before I came here, I wanted to figure out with a friend of mine how I could maybe create impressions of trees, maybe even cast trees, and figure that out in a way that I understood and was relatively simplistic. And I think that's still a question, but I'm going to set that aside. Mm-hmm. I figured out a few things. I think this idea of storytelling, contextualizing it for a person. So, if there's a tree, maybe there's a story for that person with the tree. Maybe it's a tree they stand on, climb in, chop down, who knows? But what are those connections? I also think it's really a source of inspiration. Nature is a source of inspiration for me, and trying to not just have a source of inspiration, but a way of being a partner with it. I haven't read the book yet, Braiding Sweetgrass, I think.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Okay.
Yeah.
But on the
Robin
back...
Wall Kimmerer.
Yes.
Yes.
The back of her book, she talks about this idea of reciprocity. Mm-hmm. And I think that right there is a really strong connection point.
I think you're onto something.
Yeah.
Bill and I are always delighted when there are kids on the property to see how they instinctually go a lot of times for the tree.
Right.
You know,
the apple tree.
The main
Right.
apple tree in the front yard has those really low branches.
Yes.
And I remember, climbing a tree as a kid.
Right.
I mean, there was nothing better than being up in that tree. We had a mask making workshop a couple of summers ago, and there were several kids, and God bless them, we had the kids and the parents. And of course, the parents ended up making the masks, and the kids all ran down the ramp, and many of them ended up in the tree. And we had parents kind of standing there like, I've never seen my kid climb a tree before. I mean, he doesn't have a tree to climb.
Right.
The thing that's fascinating is there's something instinctual in us that it's like, oh my God, I got to climb that. I want to be close to it. There's an intimacy in that. But that's where love and appreciation starts, which is where reciprocity starts.
Right.
And if you are in a situation where you may not have trees,
right.
much less being able to climb trees, where does the reciprocity start? Because you
right.
have no opportunity to have a connection or to fall in love with that living being.
Right. Exactly.
We grew up on, we haven't talked about this before. I'm the baby of 9.
Okay.
I have probably 45 nieces
yes.
and great nieces and nephews.
Yes.
Of all the nieces and nephews, we grew up on 3 acres, and there was a pond, there was a rock quarry adjacent to us. I mean, there were trees everywhere, but there was a willow tree in the front yard.
Yeah.
And if you ask all of my nieces and nephews what is the number one thing they remember about that property, in nature-based,
yeah.
I would bet 95% of them would say, number one, that willow tree. They would not only say the tree, but they would know the breed of the tree, because it was this magnificent tree, the only one like it.
Right.
And that was the place where they climbed,
right.
and they played, and games were based out of that. And nephews, I think I have 2 nephews that have the tattoo of that tree.
Oh, wow.
It's fascinating, that tree of all that was there,
right.
nature-based for them to experience, it was that tree.
Right.
In some ways, it became a part of your family.
It really did.
Right.
Yeah. And to the point where when we go back now, when we went back, the tree wasn't there.
Right.
And it was devastating.
Oh. Now, do you know how it ended?
We don't, sadly.
See? Yeah.
And it was a magnificent tree.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a hike. My neighbor in northern Wisconsin took me on, and at the end of this hike, they had cut one chunk of the tree, kind of like the stump there.
Oh, right.
Just I don't know what that's called, but anyway, it was hanging up, and they had marked it, because from an environmental education standpoint, you can mark those rings of time. I would say very often many trees are older than any of us, and most of them are multi-generation. So that's always really fascinating to me. And one thing I was thinking about with the trees is, they grow up and they grow out, and the rings tell the story. So there's just a really fascinating holistic viewpoint there.
I'm curious.
More.
I don't know if there's any answer to this, but what we have been fascinated with is watching you gather these organic materials around the farm, the long daylily leaves and spiny things and dead things and hornets' nests, which are just fascinating. And
there's a hornet right in front of me right now that is literally still pissed about that.
Yeah,
that I've been keeping my eye on through the whole conversation.
He's got an eye on you.
He does. I'm like, okay, let's get along here. Anyway, sorry.
But I wonder about the language of this land, because in many ways, all those little organic pieces are kind of vocabulary of Everwood,
right?
In ways that we haven't even explored. And I'm just wondering, from a storytelling perspective, what are you learning about this piece of land from the materials that you're drawing from it?
Sure. That's a great question.
I'll give you $5 if you give a good answer to that. 'Cause that's a really tough question. That's a zinger, Chris Everett.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
There is a peacefulness and gentleness to this land. I don't know much about this region. It's an interesting name to be called the Driftless region, because this land, Everwood, does not feel driftless. Like if we think about driftless, it's often in more of a negative sense, but it feels really grounded here. Even all of the buildings as well. Like there's a strong sense of place, I think, here at Everwood. And I think there's delights, there's delights everywhere. There's a huge variety, whether it's the large fields or the trees or the prairie or, the creek down the way. I think there's simply history, you don't see ceramic electric insulators often, and you certainly don't see them in that shape.
We've also found little kids' toys.
Oh, sure.
Like game pieces. We've found old keys to diaries.
Yeah.
We found a cork.
Wow.
In a tree.
Okay.
Like plugged in the tree.
When we had actually cut a tree and we were cutting it up for firewood, there was a cork in a tree.
Wow.
And we've kept that cork to this day.
Yeah.
And just thinking about the story of who put that cork in that tree.
Right.
What were they celebrating?
Yeah.
Was it a solo celebration?
Right.
Was it a first date? I mean, it's just it's the storyteller in me can go off.
Yeah.
Thinking about that cork.
Yeah.
And then the place,
absolutely,
the tree literally embraced it.
Grew around.
Right.
Essentially the cork.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, which I think is fascinating because the trees do adapt, and the trees go with the flow a lot, whether it's moving around that sidewalk or
going around the fence post.
Yes, exactly.
I see what you're saying though, like the idea of if you're forced to adapt, it's almost like you're not in control.
Right.
You've lost a little control, so you have to adapt.
Right.
Yeah, what you're saying is the tree is still very much in control.
Exactly.
Even though it's adapting.
Exactly. When I was thinking about sculpture, I often struggle with sort of encapsulating what I do into one sentence or one concise aspect. And I think for me as a sculptor, I really like this idea of space, which is still a big topic, but how do we define space? What does space look like? What are the limits of space? And then the openness of space. And so when I was thinking this week, and really part of the pandemic as well, is this idea of letting there be openings in your spaces. And I have found that both literally and metaphorically, being in an apartment in the city, but letting openness happen, connecting with friends who now live across the country, that's pretty amazing, because I don't think that would have happened quite so readily beforehand. There's a spaciousness here, and definitely an opening. Yeah.
We're going to bring ourselves home here.
Yes.
And we have a question that we asked to wrap up our conversations, and it's this. How have you experienced beauty today?
Well, first there's the chickens. The chickens are very fun and beautiful in their devil-may-care attitude.
Mm-hmm. And their crinoline skirts.
That's right. And I will say, again, for me, letting go. So one of the more successful, in my mind, sculptures out there with the trees was when I let go of a lot of material and really just pulled this big hank of rope apart and down to these little pieces, and really embraced just slowing down and letting go and being in the moment and creating, a pretty beautiful sculpture that feels like it fits with the landscape. I think that's how I've experienced beauty today.
Our sincere hope is that it lasts. Through our first Artist Series performance is August 7th. The first time
dear.
we'll have, more than a handful of people here.
That, though.
Yes, but for that group to be able to see it, our sincere hope is it weathers the storms, if you will, over the next 6 weeks for others to appreciate its beauty. So thank you for sharing that with us and with those to come.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for this conversation.
It's been a pleasure having you here. I hope you come back.
Yeah, me too.
Good.
Cheers.
I'm ready.
Thanks for listening to Conversations from the Barn at Everwood Farmstead. Our theme music is provided by John Mark Nelson. Wishing you all good health.